Welcome to our 5 on 5. We're pleased to be joined by Julie Lockhart, Executive Director of Winter Spring, and her daughter, Emma Durbin, a Winter Spring volunteer. Ladies, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our pleasure to have you. So, Julie, let me start with you in case anyone doesn't know. Why does Winter Spring exist?
Winter Spring exists because everyone experiences death of a loved one sooner or later in their lives. And our society doesn't handle death very well, and so often they're left to deal with the grief on their own, and so we provide support to children, teens, and adults who are experiencing the pain of loss, and we help them to learn how to embrace life again.
Mm-hmm. And go into a little more detail about some of those programs.
We have, our primary support is through group support, which is very different from a counseling model where you're kind of one-on-one and it's therapy. And so people really get a lot out of the group support, and we do different kinds of groups for adults, including, say, spouse loss, or if they've lost a child, suicide loss. We have an aging and loss program. We have some holiday groups coming up for people because the holidays are difficult. And then our children's program serves people kids age 6 to adult, and then if you have teens and they've experienced a loss, we do support groups in the schools in Jackson County. Yeah. And so, if there is enough of a group of kids, we can go into a school and do group support there.
That's very good. Okay, and Emma, you lost your father. What was it like to experience death as a child?
Well, it was really hard to grieve as a child because the mental process was much less back then. And I just remember days where I wouldn't know why I was crying, but I'd be crying all day long. One thing that I do remember, though, is that I would sit and just wish that it wasn't real and someone was playing this evil prank on me.
Wow. Yeah, and how has that changed now you're a teenager and you're a volunteer with the program? How does it affect you now as a teenager?
Well, it's been 9 years. I've figured out how to empathize with people, and it's much easier for me to relate with others. But I've also had to reprocess my grief and go through things that I couldn't go through as a child. No,
it's totally understandable. And why did you decide to volunteer with Winter Spring to help kids go through that same process?
I volunteer because it's really hard for adults to understand how kids grieve, and I feel like I know more about that.
Any help you can give, that's wonderful. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, ladies. We'll have much more in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to our 5 on 5. Again, we're here with Julie Lockhart, the Executive Director of Winter Spring, and her daughter, Emma Durbin, a Winter Spring volunteer. Julie, can you give us some tips on what to look for if teens or children are grieving?
Yeah, I think it's really important, Craig, to realize that sometimes they're going to behave in ways that you wouldn't necessarily associate with grief. So they might be sick fairly frequently, or they might do some acting out behavior that just seems kind of like normal kid behavior, but just paying close attention to things like that. And it's really important that you realize that as they grieve, they're going to hit different stages of development and continue to grieve in different ways. So it's important not to just think they're done when they're 8. Emma was not done when she was 8. At 10, she started struggling with some things. So there were some things, and I would not have necessarily guessed that it was grief-related, but I definitely got on it and gave her the attention she needed.
Yeah, and is that what adults, parents should do, is open up that dialogue, or what do you recommend they do?
I always recommend that we open up dialogue. It's really important, any adult that's working with children, to help them to feel safe and loved, and with the older teens to establish some kind of a rapport and trust so that the teens feel comfortable. It's also really important that they know that what they're going through is really normal, and they will feel different. One of the nice things about the group support is that they realize they're not the only different kid in the school. Yeah. And so those are all the kinds of things that you really need to be taking care of and watching out for. Routines are really important too, routines and boundaries, even if there's been a grief. It's really easy to kind of slack off, but don't. They really need that for their own security.
Okay, and Emma, having experienced loss as a child, any tips for parents out there from a kid's perspective?
You can't tell them that their loved one is in a better place. It just makes them feel like they weren't good enough.
Interesting. Okay. All right. And then let's see, Julie, you have upcoming events, correct? Tell us
We
what's
do.
going
We've
on.
got some upcoming events. We've got 2 weeks from tonight, we've got the opening night of Evita at the Camelot Theater.
Oh, cool.
And we're selling the tickets out of our office, 541-552-0621. We also have a volunteer training. We're always welcoming new volunteers. That's the first weekend in November. We will co-host the Survivors Day, Suicide Survivors Day on November 23rd, and also annually we have Gypsy Soul do a concert that benefits us, so that's coming up the week before Christmas.
Oh, wonderful. Excellent. Ladies, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Stay with us. We'll be right back.